Hi everyone, Niamh here and welcome back to my art journaling channel. Today we're going to be making some Halloween trading cards and making a folder for them to go in. And it's again using the new releases from Kinder Creations. So to do this challenge, and shout out to Kerry who I'm doing this with, we decided we'd use some playing cards to decorate, and the challenge was to use black and orange and Halloween theme. Because playing cards tend to be covered with plastic, they're really hard to paint on, and you can gesso them, but it can sometimes scratch off. So if you lightly sand the surface, or some playing cards you can peel off the top layer of plastic, but what I chose to do is I had some extra paper, sticker paper with some of my use it up bits and pieces lying around, so I decided that would make a good base for my collages. So I just stuck the sticker paper straight over the top of the playing cards and trimmed them off. So I'm making two sets, one for Kerry and one for myself. So starting off, getting some paints and stencils organised. I'm using some of the new stencils from the Kinder Creations, so this cobweb, just going over lightly to put some darkness into the background with some white. Tricky thing with playing cards are they're a little bit slippy, so just be careful when you're doing with it, or you could put a little bit of tape behind or just hold them better than I was doing at the time. So I'm just using some VersaFine ink, just really light. There's barely any ink on my blending tool, and because the VersaFine has a little bit of oil in it, it actually stays fairly wet on the blending brush, so you don't actually have to put that much on, and even if you had some on from a day before, there's probably enough there that you could go back and use it. I'm going back in with some of the Tangerine Dina Wakley paints, and stamping that, sponging that through the background of my second stencil, which is a double toil and trouble stencil. Now some of it came up, it was a bit patchy when I was putting it through, but I kind of liked that. And I found when I actually dried it, it went on really well. The sticker paper has a funny sort of, it is matte, but because it's been through the laser printer, it's a little bit slippy, so the paint wasn't adhering to it as well as it could have been. So what I'm using now is the printed collage sheets with skeleton pieces and a skull and a heart. Because Kerry's a nurse, I thought this might appeal to her in the Halloween sense. So I'm just cutting those out. As with all my tissue papers, when I do them, I tend to cut them out as closely as possible because I don't like having the halo around it. Now I found with these tissues that you have to be really gentle with them, and actually putting down more of the gel medium to glue them down than you need is really good, because it gets a really good, adheres really well to the surface, and then you can just use your palette knife to use the excess in the background to cover over the top again. You can see my mat getting a little bit messy, but that's fine, it just wipes off. So by doing this, I wasn't tearing the collage papers. Unlike some other collage papers, this stuff is really, really fine, which is brilliant because it means it goes really translucent and really blends into the background. The gel medium I'm using is matte as well, which makes a big difference, so you don't have that glossy surface to work with, and it means that you can do more over the top. So I'm just heating those up with my heat gun just to dry them off, and then I decided to put some stamping around the edges to frame them. So this is an old Tim Holtz Stampers Anonymous set, and it just had this sort of flower vine thing that I really liked. And as I was stamping on it, I originally only was going to put it on one side, but I decided to put it on two. So to continue to go around the edges of the cards, just framing them, and I don't mind the stampings overlapping the image, it sort of blends it into the background. So again, because I'm working with the VersaFine, I'm heat setting it. It does stay a bit wet to the touch for a little bit longer than, say, an archival ink does, but I tend to find I get a much blacker black using the VersaFine. So I decided, just particularly on the skulls, because they had that open area up in the forehead, that I go back in with my paint and just add a little bit of the extra words to the fronts just to add a little bit of extra detail and difference. When I was going through all the chipboard I had, I found these bats because they were while I liked what I'd done, it was very, very flat. So I decided to add a little bit of dimension with the chipboard. And because I didn't want to get my black paint out and get all messy because it was so tiny, I decided to use my Posca paint pen, which has an acrylic paint in it, to paint up the bats to put on. So I had 5 bats of the chipboard that would fit onto my trading cards, but I needed a 6th one. And when I went through the pack, there was actually an acrylic bat, a black acrylic bat cut out as well, which was really good because I didn't need to paint it, and you can see the difference. It's much darker and just really stands out. So now it's just deciding where I want to put my bats on my pieces to get the best placement for them. I also decided to go around and add a little bit more orange into my pieces because the whole theme was orange and black, and they were starting to look a little bit red rather than orange. So I'm just using my carved pumpkin distress oxide to go in and just add that little bit of punch of colour. The good thing about the distress oxides is, again, because they react with water, you've got a bit of time, and with a wet baby wipe, if I put too much on, I was able to wipe it away just to get that more distressed look to it. So now I'm just using some mixed media glue to glue down my bats just where they needed to be. I thought the 2 bats on the skulls looked like bows. They fitted in quite well. So, and where I've put my finger in the Posca paint pen, I've just gone back and retouched that. So these are really, really simple to do, and the terrible thing about them, or a terrible thing about me, I suppose, is you just want to keep adding stuff to them. I had bits and pieces and I wanted to keep adding. I decided that I wanted to put some splatters on, so I got my white chalk pen out and decided to splash it over the top just to make it look that aged, distressed look again. So here's a close-up of the finished trading cards. This is the one with the heart, the skull, and you can see the text coming back through and the layers. And with the tissue, you can sort of see it blending into the background. So once I'd made the cards, I decided I wanted to have a folder for them to go in. Now this is a technique I learned a long time ago. It's very, very handy when you're a teacher to know some of these how to make little books and little folders. It comes in really well, and the kids think you're really clever when you can do it, and they can make these books to put different pieces in. But this folder in particular is fantastic for ACTs or for trading cards or little bits and pieces that you don't want to get lost. It's also really, really good for if you have gift cards and you want to make a sort of card to go with the gift card. So all I'm doing is I've got some watercolour paper and I'm just colouring both sides. You will see both sides of this paper. So if you're using, for example, scrapbooking paper, use a double-sided paper that you're going to see, or a stamp on the background of a plain paper so you can see the contrast in the 2 pages. It is quite good to have contrast so you can see what you're doing and where they're going to go. But if you want it all the same, use the same paper on both sides. So I'm just going in with a damask lace stamp, and I'm using the black soot distress ink just to bring that orange and black in. And then on using the same stamp and using the carved pumpkin on the purple just to get that little pop of colour. Now on one, you will see one side of the paper a lot more than the other, but you will see both sides of the paper. I would suggest, if you're doing this, to use a slightly thinner paper than the watercolour paper I'm using here. While it worked really well, it was a little bit thick. So all I'm doing is folding it in half, folding in both edges, then I'm folding up the corners on 4 sides into that second quarter. You fold it in, fold over a little bit at the top and make sure that's really folded down, and then tuck in the corners, and that's it. And then fold it into a little book. So you end up with 4 little pockets and just a nice little booklet that you can put stuff in. Tags, anything. It's just a really handy little fold. So now I'm just going back in and finish decorating it. The issue with decorating it beforehand, particularly if you're using something that's directional like those words, is you're never quite sure what way it's going to pop up, and you could end up putting them in upside down. Now if it's in the background, that's not an issue, but some people get really frustrated if their words end up upside down. I'm just using this pumpkin stencil on the front and using that, bringing that purple back in again, and then I'm going to use some black to put the faces on. I really love this stencil. It's really versatile, and it can be quite cute or it can be quite scary depending on how you do it. So just going back in again with the cobweb, just again, what I'm basically trying to do is to bring all these through lines. So I've got the cobwebs on the trading cards, so to bring that into what I'm doing. And all I'm doing is using up my extra paint in my Use It Up journal. I quite liked how this turned out, so I don't know what I'm going to come up with this page. You know, I really liked how it framed on the gold. So now I'm just fiddling around, seeing what I'm going to do. I had some extra chipboard, so I really like this cat, and I decided I was going to put that on the front. And again, just using the leftover paint that I had on my sponge. Nothing goes to waste, and you need a lot less paint than you think when you're doing things like this. Your sponge actually retains quite a lot of paint, so you've got a lot to play with. So I've got this witch that I thought would fit really well on the inside, and I've got some flare buttons that match the witch that I'm going to put in too. I thought that would look quite good in the centre of the cobweb, which says Hocus Pocus. I think I end up with a different one though. So this is just all the sort of finishing. I think it says resting witch face, which I totally understand sometimes. So just trying to work out and refold this. That's really important. If you stick anything on the inside, just refold it to make sure that it actually folds flat. So I had to slightly shift my witch. Now what I'm doing here is I'm actually cutting the tabs at the top and folding them back in again so I can fit my tags in. If you had a tag or something that would fit out the edge, that would be fine, but sometimes those little corner bits get in the way. By cutting them and then refolding them underneath, you still keep everything really secure, but you can get something to come in and out through the top. So these are a close-up of the finished piece. I'm really happy with how it turned out. I hope my swap partner is happy with how it turned out as well. But it was a really fun project, and I love the fact that I've got a folder to put my trading cards in and make it a complete kit. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you really enjoyed this, and I hope you get into the trading cards in the future as well and make a little folder for it too. See you later.